In the news this week, opening up about surrogacy, a WA woman reveals her move to seek an alternative route to having children, a WAMA News exclusive.
Also this week, turmoil in the opposition. The leadership challenge for both Liberals and Nationals is set to go ahead in the next few days.
Line dances to welcome the Year of the Rabbit. Major celebrations in Northbridge to mark the Chinese Lunar New Year.
And voice versus treaty, the latest debate following Australia Day, plus Dr. Andrew Miller's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Loon and Melita Thorne.
Good evening. Before the surrogacy story, we have an exclusive about the opposition leadership challenge. A source close to the leadership race slammed the email leaked between Liberal leader David Honey and challenger Libby Mettam. The source labelled the leadership challenge as being part of a wider threat to two specific Liberal MPs. The source says it's entirely inappropriate that the letter was leaked to the media. This, which is Libby's challenge, is clearly a part of an ongoing push against Nick Goran and Peter Collier out of their Liberal parliamentary positions. Nick Goran and Peter Collier are powerful members of the state Liberal team. This weekend, David Honey made it clear that he will challenge for the leadership, and we'll bring you the full story as it happens on Monday. Now we return to our top story on surrogacy. Claire Woodhead has always dreamt of motherhood. Unfortunately, due to certain circumstances involving an unfaithful partner, IVF failures and contracting cancer, it's been a difficult path for her. Claire is now seeking an alternative route to having a child and wants to share with viewers her story and awareness on surrogacy within Australia. Madeline Lombardi with this exclusive interview.
So Claire, first and foremost, can you explain your story of wanting to have a child and how it led you to seeking surrogacy?
Yeah, so a number of years ago I was in a long-term relationship with a man, but unfortunately that ended as he was unfaithful. So I froze my eggs and undertook IVF, so a few rounds of IVF to get a number of eggs to freeze. And in the hope of meeting, I guess, somebody else, a nice man down the track, with whom I could have a family and hopefully, babies together. That didn't happen, and this year, or last year, should I say, my IVF specialist said that I needed to get my skates on and go and have a baby if I was going to do it. And so I was having the preliminary investigations done with a pelvic ultrasound, and they found a polyp. So ultimately they did a procedure called a hysteroscopy, and they found something called atypical hyperplasia. So that's like precancerous cells. So that was pretty devastating. But my IVF specialist, in consultation with my gynecological oncologist and surgeon, put me on high-dose progesterone, because in 60 to 70% of cases they can actually reverse the precancerous cells and successfully implant an embryo. Unfortunately for me, that didn't happen, and so a further hysteroscopy showed that I had endometrial cancer, and so the advice was that I needed to have a hysterectomy, which again was really, really devastating for me. And it's one thing getting cancer, but it's quite another, having to deal with the fact that I can't give birth to my own child. Fortunately for me, I had a fantastic surgeon, and they got the cancer really early, and so I'm in the clear, so I don't have to have chemotherapy or radiotherapy. So my prognosis is excellent. But in order to have a child, I now have to find a surrogate so that they can carry the baby for me.
Seems like it's been a really difficult process for you, and a challenging one as well, having found out wanting to have a baby that you've been diagnosed with cancer, and thankfully being treated for it, which has been fantastic, but still now you have to go through the process of having to find a surrogate What's that been like for you?
So I didn't know very much about surrogacy, and a lot of Australians don't know a lot about surrogacy before, I guess, being in that situation. Unlike IVF, which years ago in the 70s and 80s was thought of as, quite niche, now is really commonplace. So all of us probably know someone who wanted to do or has done IVF. Surrogacy, perhaps in coming years, will become a bit more like that. So as I say, I didn't know much about it, but I started speaking to a surrogacy lawyer who herself was a surrogate, and the process is, there's a number of layers of complexity around it. Firstly, in Australia, surrogacy is altruistic, so the surrogate, through the generosity and kindness of their own hearts, offers to carry the baby for somebody else. They don't get a commercial payment, so all of their costs are covered for the surrogacy, but again, there's no commercial payment can be made. So altruism is centre in Australia to the process. Often it's friends or relatives of the person, but sometimes it can be somebody who's just reaching out to somebody in need of surrogacy to actually carry the baby for somebody else. As part of the process, it's a marathon rather than a sprint, and the surrogate firstly has to be medically fit in order to carry a baby. So, and they also, different clinics have different rules, but often it's that the surrogate has to at least have had one child herself, and a good pregnancy that's not, had serious medical complications. So, the health of the surrogate is really paramount, and the health of the baby. So, the needs of the child are central to the whole process, and the surrogate having autonomy over her own body. Yeah. So the surrogate would have to get clearance from an obstetrician, so have a full medical, and then if that is fine, then there's a legal process. So both the intended parent or the intended mother have to have get legal advice in Australia. That is part of the process, and the surrogate as well has to have a lawyer. And usually a legal agreement is drawn up in terms of what is laid out, in terms of the agreed process. So will it be a hospital birth with an obstetrician? What are the needs of the surrogate and the intended parent, and what are the expectations of both parties, and how will the costs of the surrogacy. So whilst in Australia surrogacy is altruistic, all the costs of the pregnancy are covered by the intended parent. So, for instance, any medical costs or time off work for sick leave, if the surrogate doesn't have sick leave as part of their conditions of employment, the travel costs to appointments, or say if the surrogate needed a physio or a cleaner in the final trimester of pregnancy, etc. So all those costs are covered by the intended parent, so that the surrogate isn't out of pocket, clearly for an altruistic act of giving birth to an intended parent's child.
So it's an act of altruism, as you were saying, something that could be done by either a family member or a relative in that sense, but also can be kind of shared with different members outside of that family as well. And there are rules intended in that as well that happen within Australia. If Australia wasn't an option for you, what are the options outside of Australia, say overseas? Is that something that you would consider as well?
Again, there's overseas is perhaps more complex because you're dealing with different countries' legal provisions. Say in the US, for instance, where it's highly regulated, it's also more costly. So say in the US, there's agencies and clinics where they screen a lot of mothers out, so for health reasons. So they're very strict on, and that's the beauty, I guess, of regulation, that it also ensures that the mother is not only healthy to carry the pregnancy, but also isn't going to be exploited as a result. So if there's any financial vulnerability, then you're ruled out as well. So that's the beauty of highly regulated countries, say like the US, whereas say you might remember years ago there was Gammy in Thailand, the little child who was born, and there was he was born with Down syndrome, and so there was a lot of legal, complexity around that, and whether the birth mother would keep the child or whether the intended parents came back with the sister of the child. So it can be extremely complex, and lots of people have really good stories about all sorts of different countries, be it Colombia or even Ukraine, which is war-torn now. Personally for me, I'd want something regulated so that there was greater protections for a surrogate, rather than, if the mother's needs are not met in certain countries, are there the legal provisions there to protect the surrogate? So that would be, important for me. Obviously, if preferences would be for altruistic surrogacy in Australia, and the costs associated with overseas are far greater as well. So surrogacy full stop is an expensive process. So the IVF around that in terms of the cycles required, or you might go through 5 different embryo transfers before you get one to take. So it's an extremely expensive process. It can cost anywhere in the vicinity of between $15,000 and $100,000 in Australia. Extremely expensive. So that's covering everything in terms of the IVF aspect, but also the costs, covering the costs of the surrogate as well. Overseas, and again, this is probably why some people choose to go to other countries that aren't fully regulated, but say in the US it can cost, several $100,000s. So you're talking a lot of money, and I guess that's why the altruistic aspect, for a whole bunch of reasons, is a preferred option, really.
And for those of our viewers out there, I'll ask you this final question, who know about surrogacy but don't know the depth and awareness surrounding surrogacy as well, because we've had this really in-depth conversation, and I feel like it's probably popped up a lot of insight into a lot of our viewers. Where can they go for further information if they want to learn more about surrogacy within Australia and also overseas, and that kind of education as well?
So Sarah Jefford is a very well-renowned lawyer, and in fact she was a surrogate herself. So she wrote a book actually on surrogacy because there was this dearth of information on surrogacy in Australia. And when she was being a surrogate there, or when she was a surrogate for a couple, she saw the lack of information out there for people. So she's got a book out called More Than a Baby, and a guide for intended parents and surrogates. So that is, I actually have a copy of that book, and it's a really great resource for how to go about surrogacy and the legal aspect of that. Both the medical aspect first, then followed by the legal. There's also the Australian Surrogacy Handbook that's useful to have a look at as well, because in Australia each jurisdiction or each state and territory have different laws. So what's legal in one state might be illegal in another state. So for instance, even going overseas for surrogacy can be illegal in some states. That's not the case in Western Australia. There's other experts as well that can assist on speaking about their experiences in dealing with clinics overseas as well. Certainly there's those for the US that are around, but again, navigating that is really difficult, and a lot of Australian women do not know what do they do first in this whole process. So certainly going to see a lawyer and getting that kind of legal aspect of it is a really good starting point.
Thank you for sharing your story on surrogacy, Claire. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Maddie.
That was Claire Woodhead speaking about surrogacy and her desire for motherhood. For viewers who want to find out about surrogacy, Claire has recommended lawyer, a former surrogate, Sarah Jefford's book, More Than Just a Baby, a guide to surrogacy for intended parents and surrogates. Due to surrogacy laws being different in each Australian states, it's also recommended that viewers go through a copy of Australian Surrogacy Handbook and seek a lawyer for further clarification.
To other news, and WA's opposition has been thrown into turmoil, with both Liberal and National parties facing leadership changes. Several hours after opposition leader Mia Davies resigned as Nationals leader, Liberal MP Libby Mettam prepared to challenge leader David Honey. To make sense of it all, political commentator Peter Kennedy joins us for his take. Peter, thanks for joining us. Do you think it's fair to say that Mia Davies' resignation triggered Libby Mettam's challenge to become the new WA Liberal leader?
I think it probably has. I think it probably has been a big factor in the timing of it. People have talked about the fact that Libby Mettam may pose a challenge somewhere in the future, and I think Mia Davies' decision to stand down as National Party leader has triggered the timing, has brought it forward, her challenge to David Honey.
Who do you think will replace Mia Davies as the Nationals leader?
I would think at this stage the Deputy Shane Love is probably best placed. He's the more experienced of the two. Peter Rundle is the other probable contender, but Shane Love, more experienced, been in Parliament the longer, and may well have the numbers. But look, Monday's meeting for the Nationals could be very close.
We understand that Libby may have the numbers to win the leadership race, but do you believe she's up to the challenge?
Oh, well, look, yes, I do. I think she is up to the challenge. She's been in the Parliament long enough now. She's been Deputy Leader for 2 years. She's been the party spokesperson on some controversial issues, particularly health, and the general view is that she's made a good fist of it. So that I think with that experience under her belt, then probably she is better placed now to step up. Big job, don't underestimate the importance of the job, but I think with that experience now that she is in a position to take it on should she be elected.
Peter Kennedy, thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
Perth's Chinese Lunar New Year festival is underway in Northbridge with another year of successful celebrations. Firecrackers and lion dances kicked off the event as thousands of citizens gathered to enjoy the festive celebrations. Changhua Association WA's Honorary Secretary Jenny Chong joins us. Jenny, 恭喜发财. How's the festival going?
Hi Ivan. Well, we're here at the Perth Chinese New Year Fair. It's the 12th year that Changhua Association has organised this. This year we're back to our home of the Chinese New Year Fair in James Street. We're also expanding to Yagan Square, so there'll be celebrations there too. At the moment we've got concert throughout the day. There are also food stores, lots of free children's activities like face painting, lantern making, calligraphy. So hopefully everyone can come down and join us. And then tonight we also have a multicultural concert from 7 to 9 o'clock. Also lion and dragon dancing every hour. So everyone, I'd like to say, 恭喜发财. Back to you.
Thanks, Jenny. Perth Lord Mayor Basil Zempilas believes it's inevitable the date of Australia Day will change in the future. Speaking to the media following the Australia Day Citizenship and Awards ceremony in the Perth Town Hall, the Lord Mayor commented on the future of Australia Day.
Is the date going to change? It feels almost inevitable that eventually it will change, and I think what today shows is that we can celebrate, we can come together, we can show respect, and we can be appropriate on our National Day. And I think that's what Australians want. They want a National Day where they can come together and mark it the way they want.
Mr Zempilas also praised Megan Krakow, the First Nations activist who won the Community Citizen of the Year award. Ms Krakow was genuinely surprised by the win, while the Lord Mayor says her victory was based on merit.
Western Australia's Arab community gathered in Thornley this week to celebrate Australia Day. Hundreds of parents, children and other members of the community attended the event at Homestead Park. Free barbecues, community performances, water slides and bouncy castles entertained the attendees. The event was held by the Australian Arab Association since 2022. The group is preparing for the Arab Festival and E-Carnival Festival later this year. The association's spokeswoman Amal Youssef believes Australia Day means unity. She also emphasised the members of the Australian Arab community are proud to be Australians.
Our home is where you make it, and this is where we've decided to make it.
Are you proud of it too?
I'm very proud to be Australian. and I know that community is very proud. It can actually just show by the people turning out today. They're proud to be Australian.
Fitzroy Crossing Police coordinated a safe and humane relocation of a crocodile spotted in the main town site. A member of the public called Fitzroy Crossing Police and informed them of the crocodile at around 2 a.m. on Australia Day. The crocodile was located roaming the main street of the town. The officers attempted to contain the croc's movements out of concern for the safety of the public. After using several techniques which were not effective due to the crocodile's active response, the officers sought out the assistance of a local volunteer wildlife expert, Tamla from Wildlife West Inc., who successfully tranquilised and relocated the crocodile without the officers or croc being in any danger or harm. Tamla cares for injured animals and played a crucial part in facilitating the safety of all those involved. The crocodile was secured and transported to a river system where it would normally live and be monitored as it recovered from being tranquilised and its return to its natural habitat.
Can't beat a good crocodile story. And now here's AMA WA spokesman Dr. Andrew Miller with his weekly medical update and news commentary.
I went along to the GP this week for the usual checkup of blood pressure and sugar and a few blood tests to make sure that the systems are running okay. Very important to get that routine preventive maintenance, and we do it for our cars. We make sure the oil gets changed. But men in particular tend to be bad at looking after themselves, and just as we're getting back into the working year and perhaps going back into the office after summer for a lot of people, it's a good time to just check on all those basic things and make sure that we keep a relationship with a general practitioner. A really important thing to do, because they do look at a lot of things over a long period of time that can make sure that there's not some problem just slowly burning away in the background there that we're not aware of, and until we have to take bigger measures to sort it out. So it's a good time of the year to rethink about our habits, and one of those, of course, breathing clean air, which is a new habit that we've had to take on since 2019. And the point was well made to me this week that a lot of people still dealing with the trauma of the pandemic, the associated lockdowns and the change in lifestyles and separation from people that came about, and perhaps a feeling a bit unsafe for the first time in our lives. And really important to get past that trauma and get on with, well, what can we do in order to make a safe and healthy future for ourselves and our family. Obviously, avoiding infection, one thing, breathing clean air whenever we possibly can is another. And along with avoiding cigarette smoke, avoiding catching any unnecessary virus in the future is going to be an important long-term preventative healthcare step. So take care of yourselves and your family. Make sure you just attend to these basic things so that we can enjoy all the wonderful things that are available to us here in our free community. Thanks for your time.
And that was Dr. Andrew Miller. On an earlier note, I'd be quite surprised if I saw a crocodile wandering through my town at midnight. How about you, Ivan?
You've never experienced that kind of things before when you're living in the bush?
It is certainly not what you tend to see in Narrabeen, I can tell you that.
2 a.m. in the morning, eh?
Oh dear.
What an adventure on Australia Day. We'll recap this week's top stories again in just a moment.
But right now, here's Madeline Lombardi with Western Perspective.
Thank you so much, Ivan and Melly. Welcome to Western Perspective. I'm Madeline Lombardi. Nulla Court's CEO Mervyn Eads spoke with WAMN News following the Invasion Day rally on January 26 about calling for treaty. The Nulla Court CEO says the constitutional voice to Parliament does not represent First Nation people, wider communities within Australia and society in general, which is why they're calling for treaty.
Yes, this week, as we have seen, with the Invasion Day ceremonies right across the country, from Black Australia, as non-Indigenous call it Australia Day, we call it Invasion Day. Our people's theme this year has been no to constitutional voice. The constitutional voice does not represent us and doesn't represent the people of our communities and the wider Australia, Aboriginal communities and society in general. We were never ever consulted in a proper manner. Our young people would not even understand what the constitutional voice means to them. What our people are calling out for, as the rallies would have shown very clearly, that we are calling out for a treaty. We are calling out for a treaty and truth-telling. This country's ignorance has ignored our many cries for over 100 years that we are calling out for a treaty. But the Australian government has not entertained treaty. They want to give us a voice in Parliament, but a voice of their representation of Aboriginal people is not the voice of representation of our wider and whole Aboriginal communities and society, and a national voice. It's not a national voice because it represents those handpicked from government. And what our people are calling out for is treaty. One of the only countries in the world that has been invaded and no treaty done with us at all is Australia. We are calling out for treaty and truth-telling, and that's a clear message that has been echoed throughout Invasion Day rallies right across the country.
Can Australia afford a treaty?
Australia needs to afford a treaty.
Can they afford one?
Well, the 12th most certainly can afford a treaty. The 12th richest economy in the world. Yes, they can afford a treaty with the sovereign First Peoples. Let's not get away. Let's be real and let's talk truth-telling. Australia is just over 230-year history. We're talking about a people that have been here for 80,000 plus years, and we have a constitution that they don't even recognise within our law and culture. The Australian government refused to even recognise or acknowledge that. The oldest culture and the oldest people in the world is us. But we do have a constitution of law and culture, and and that was the way of our people and our customs for 80,000 plus years as the oldest people in culture in the world. What they're selling, what is being sold, is sold by a group of elites, handpicked elites from government, handpicked elite Aboriginal people to sell it for government. But we have not been. We are not in the picture. This has been dictated upon us.
If you're in the picture, at least actually grassroots people in the picture, how would it look like? How would the voice to Parliament actually look like?
Well, Michael Mansell says it well from Tasmania. He says it well. Have enshrined in Parliament 2 representatives, senators from every state, 2 representatives, Aboriginal senators from every state. So it's enshrined. Because at the moment,
you don't need a third chamber, but instead ensure that there are Indigenous people actually in Parliament from each state, a bare minimum.
Absolutely, and from what Michael Mansell has laid out, yes. And that could be a balance of a vote against us or a vote for us from our own people to say, yes, this is right, or no, this is wrong. But what they're offering us is a voice to Parliament where it doesn't have to become binding. It doesn't have to become, legally binding or law implemented through the voice. They could just ignore the voice. It's I'll say it for what it really is. It's an egg with no yolk. The voice is an egg with no yolk.
So therefore you're calling for a treaty. How would a treaty that's actually beneficial to your people look like?
A treaty beneficial to our people would look like this. Personally, what I say is 5% or 10% of all GDP to get our people out of the impoverishment and as the poorest people in the country, as we all know, and to give us equality of life, equality as equals. Because at the moment, the 12th richest economy in the world, and yet the sovereign people of this country are the poorest people in our own country. How can that be? When, the mining is booming all around us and everyone's growing, the mining, everyone's booming, but there's no taxes or no nothing given back to our people. What they have given us is native title. Native title has taken away more than it has given to our people. And what I see in this constitutional voice and being enshrined in the Constitution is power and control over the people within the Australian Constitution. So they've taken our land with native title and with Constitution, they will take away our rights as sovereign people and our independence away from their Constitution, and they want us binded to their Constitution so they will have power and control over the people.
But there's already a lot of debate on the voice itself, whether it should or shouldn't. So what's the possibility of actually even having consideration of a treaty, given that there's already so much fight on the voice itself?
Yeah, well, there's so much fight and there's no bipartisan agreement with the voice as we...
Do you afraid that it's going to get stuck, that we're not going to get anywhere at all, either with the voice or calls for treaty, based on what you see now?
Well, it will get stuck. It will get stuck. Wider society will wake up to it and say, the Aboriginal people don't want it, so why should we vote for it? You know, and the truth is, the Aboriginal people do not want it. We want a treaty. We want a treaty, a sovereign treaty of the sovereign peoples of this country. We want a treaty, but we want a treaty on our terms and conditions. We want to be a part of the treaty agreement. We want to be enshrined, our voice enshrined in a treaty agreement. And, you know, an agreement made where we are also leading the agreement.
And that was Mervyn Eades speaking about the voice to Parliament. Now here is Leo Puglisi with what's coming up next on 6 News Tonight.
Thanks, guys. On 6 News, multiple people dead as flash flooding hits Auckland, Israel to boost their military forces after several attacks, and David Honey vows to fight on in the WA Liberal Party leadership spill. Watch live right now on our YouTube channel and our website, 6newsau.com.
And that's all from Western Perspective this weekend. We'll be back with you again next Sunday. Until then, Ivan and Melly, it's back to you.
Thanks, Maddie. And that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website, wamnnews.com.au.
Don't forget to subscribe to the WAMN Extra News Club so we can continue our work in the community. Full details on wamnnews.com.au/news/extra. From Melly and myself, wish you good health, good night, see you next Sunday.
Thanks for watching.